Hello, my name is Andrew Geary, and welcome to Seismic Sound Off In-Depth Conversations in Applied Geophysics. One of the most important functions of a professional society is honoring those who have made significant contributions to the profession and to science. For one of my favorite episodes from last year, Seismic Sound Off again highlights two of the award winners from 2018, Albert Tarantola and Mrinal Sen. Albert Tarantola was awarded the 2018 Maurice Ewing Medal, the highest honor given by the SEG to a person who has made distinguished contributions both to the advancement of the science and to the profession of exploration geophysics. In a first for the award, Albert Tarantola was awarded this prestigious honor posthumously. I speak with Roel Snieder on his colleague receiving this honor. Mrinal Sen was awarded the 2018 Virgil Kauffman Gold Medal, an honor given to a person that has made an outstanding contribution to the advancement of the science of geophysical exploration as manifested during the previous 5 years. We also will have a future episode speaking to the inaugural winner of the Craig J. Beasley Award for Social Contribution, Paul Bowman. For a full list of the 2018 honors and awards, please visit seg.org/podcast. First, my conversation with Roel Snieder. So this year marks the first time SEG has bestowed its highest honor, the Maurice Ewing Medal, posthumously. You kindly accepted the Maurice Ewing Medal on behalf of Albert Tarantola. What did it mean to you to be able to accept this award on Albert's behalf?
Well, that's an interesting question. When I was first asked to do it, it seemed sort of like, okay, I'm helping out with something that needs to be done. And then I started thinking about it. And Albert Tarantola, and I'll call him Albert. We go back since the mid-1980s. I know him for a long time. He was a colleague and a good friend. And it was quite emotional for me to be up there and to speak on his behalf. I mean, of course, I couldn't really speak on his behalf, but yeah, it was a very emotional moment for me, and it also was important for me to be able to share that with the SEG members that were present at the honors and awards ceremony.
For those that may not know of Albert, could you please tell us a little bit about what his contributions were to geophysics, as well as a little bit about himself?
Yeah, so Albert came from. He had a training in general relativity, which is important. I'll explain that later. And then he came into geophysics by working on geodesy. So he was involved also with geodetic field works in Africa. And then he really moved into sort of the seismic work by combining sort of Bayesian statistics with seismic imaging. And I think it's interesting that his whole framework for doing that was based on measuring probabilities, which all has to do with measuring with measures of mathematical quantities. And that of course he picked up in general relativity, which has to do with the measures of space-time, the curvatures of space-time. And I think that really influenced his work in geophysics. Regarding his personality, he was a very passionate man. He was passionate about everything he did. And if he wasn't passionate about something, he just would not do it. He was very outspoken. He would sometimes have big arguments with others because he felt very strongly about issues, whether they were scientific or societal. So he was always in the midst of controversy, but I would say in a good way. He would stir the pot, and he would love stirring the pot. And he also just loved interacting with people. He just thrived being around people and working together with people.
There are two things that really stood out to me in your acceptance speech, both revolving around quotes that Albert signed for you in two books, one of his own, I believe. Could you tell us these quotes and what they say about him?
Sure, yeah. So the first quote that I mentioned was, it sort of goes back to an episode when we were in his office, and he learned that I'd never studied general relativity, which, as I mentioned earlier, was very important for him. And so he said, c'est impossible, it's impossible. And so he goes to his bookshelves, takes out the book of Weinberg, which is a very expensive and a very heavy book. And he wrote into it, rends-moi le même point en retour, mais en idée. So give the same weight back to me, but as ideas. And, Albert was a man of ideas, whether they were scientific or societal. He mostly cared about ideas, and he especially loved fundamental ideas. The more fundamental they were, the more passionate he was about them. And I also had his book, Elements for Physics, and he wrote in it, Pour Roel, en souvenir d'une longue complicité intellectuelle. For Roel as a memory for a long intellectual complicity. And he loved, I love that word, intellectual complicity, because that's what he loved to do with his friends. So just have long conversations, talk about science, talk about other issues. He was a very, very intellectual man in that regard.
What is your favorite memory of Albert?
Well, he was a colorful person, so I have many memories of him. But I think one of my favorite memories were that we were talking in his office about quantum mechanics, and he had never studied quantum mechanics, and he realized what a gap that was. And what a normal person would have done is would have gotten a book and study quantum physics. But Albert was a big thinker, so he immediately picks up the phone, calls the biggest experts on quantum mechanics in France, who happen to work at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. And he introduced himself and he says, I'm Professor Tarantola. I discovered I know nothing about quantum mechanics. Could you meet with me once a week to teach me? And that's what he did. And so he bought 2 copies of a wonderful book on quantum mechanics, Quantique. One copy for him, one copy for me, that we studied together. And then once a week we would go to his colleague whom we had never met before. And it was sort of funny because Albert sort of struggled with the quantum physics and I struggled with French because all the conversations were in French and the book was in French. I think the whole episode, first of all, it was just a way to spend a lot of time with him together on a professional topic. But it also speaks to the way he would do things. He was a big thinker. If you want to learn a new topic, you call the ultimate expert in the country to teach you. And he just made that commitment to himself also. Okay, I'm going to study this. I'm going to spend every week, I'm going to sit down together with Roel. We're going to study this together. And we just had a wonderful time. But it also sort of sheds lights on his character of thinking big.
What would Albert have said had he accepted this award?
That's a good question. Even when Albert was alive, it was always difficult to predict what he would say. He would change his mind often. I once remember he was giving a talk at a summer school, and he started off by saying, I was thinking about my talk last night, and I discovered it was all wrong. We have to start all over again. And so he would start on a completely different path. So it's dangerous to speculate on what he would think. I think he would thank the SEG. I think he would thank his wife Maria for her support over so many years. And then I think he would start talking about how he started the whole field of waveform inversion in the 1980s, how he made big promises, how he got a big team together, which was very exciting, how he got exciting equipment. There was a connection machine, and Albert, he loved gadgets. He had all sorts of gadgets. He loved them. And that in the mid-90s, he discovered he just could not deliver. The computers of those days could not do the task. And then that was typical Albert. He just walked away from it. He says, okay. And he went to a conference, the IUGG meeting in Vienna, and he just got up there. And he basically got up in front of 400 people and he said, I made all these promises. It cannot be done. You have to find a different way. But he was wrong. And in 2005, the whole field came back. Then the full waveform inversion became big. And he probably would describe how he much enjoyed seeing it come back. And he just saw the beginning of the comeback of that whole field. And then I think he would thank the people he worked with. He couldn't name all of them because there's a ton of them, but he would probably pick out a few. That's my guess.
You had mentioned that what Albert really wanted to do was devise a theory that would change the world. You've talked a lot how he was big on ideas. So how do you think he would have done that?
Well, because I know that for as long as I know him, in parallel to his work on geophysics, he always was working on some very fundamental physical problems in very unconventional ways. And so I think it was just after the years after I left Paris, he got sort of obsessed with the torsion of space-time. So in general relativity, space and time has a curvature, but he says, no, we also have to take the torsion into account. And he got really interested in that. And I think I think his deep wish was to come up with a theory that would sort of account for that extension of general relativity and use that to explain, for example, the stability of the electron. One day I talked to him, he was super excited because he could explain the stability of the electron from the torsion of space-time. And then later he wrote this book, Elements of Physics, which is not well known in the geophysics community, which was less ambitious, but it also was a big picture view of physics, a bigger picture than what most people do. And I think he wanted to make sort of fundamental changes. To be honest, I don't think he achieved that. But I think for every 100 or 1,000 Albert Einsteins, there's probably 99 or 999 attempts. And I think he was one of those.
How does his contributions live on today?
Well, I think he really, his whole Bayesian framework for basically model estimation in geophysics has become wildly popular. And it's been wildly popular in seismic imaging because it also paved the way for full waveform inversions and to do that in very effective ways, but also in other areas of geophysics, whole Earth geophysics. His sort of statistical framework is very widely used. So I think he had a big impact. I think the impact was actually so big that people don't even think about it anymore. Like, okay, this was his contribution, but he put a statistical framework up for model estimation in geophysics, and of course, model estimation is one of the biggest things that we do in geophysics. So I think that would be his biggest contribution. I also think that people are sort of abusing his work because what Albert described as sort of a priori knowledge, what you know about a model before you analyze the data, people use as a tool to make the solutions stable, which would go very much against his philosophy. But he definitely had a gigantic impact. And the whole field of full waveform inversion, which is very, very popular now in the SEG crowd, he basically build a foundation for it.
What would you like to leave our listeners with regarding his life and his contributions?
I think he would say, never give up, be bold, dream, be willing to engage, don't just march on the same path. I think he really would want us to make a difference, both scientifically and also in other ways. And he would encourage us to do so with a zesto and a gust, which he also had for his life and his work.
Is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I mean, I feel very privileged I had a chance to work with him, and I know I'm not alone. The nomination for him was written by a large group of people, and so I think there's a lot of people who miss him. I think his passing away was a real loss for the community, and I miss him too. What more can I say?
To read the citations for each award winner, find the November edition of The Leading Edge at library.seg.org. Now, for my conversation with Mrinal Sen. What was your reaction when you learned that you would receive the Virgil Kauffman Gold Medal?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised. When I first saw the email from Mandy, I thought I was being asked to write a letter for someone. However, when I read the mail and I found that I was selected for this award, I felt truly honored.
What, kind of taking a step back, what excited you about pursuing a career in the geosciences?
Well, I grew up in a small town. It's a beautiful town surrounded by mineral resources. Only a few miles to the north, we have mica mines. And in the south and southwest, we have a vast span of coal mines. So I grew up wondering where all these resources came from and how could people figure out where to dig. At the same time, I was really passionate about physics and math in high school. So when I went to college at the Indian School of Mines, geophysics was a natural choice.
Was it pretty easy for you to discover that there was a connection between math and physics and the rocks and those resources you grew up near?
In the beginning, it was not. It was more geology. But after a year or so, I saw the connection and I got really excited about it.
Why do you love geophysics?
Well, actually, working in geophysical problems is like solving puzzles. And I read papers and articles from many disciplines other than geosciences as well. And I find many similarities in the problems. And in fact, in other words, it's really the cross-disciplinary nature of geophysics that excites me the most.
Speaking of papers, how have you managed to create a record of more than 3,300 citations?
It's actually more than 8,000. Sorry.
Woo!
Well,
I stand corrected. I'm even more just in awe.
generally I do not look at this number, but I do find it very satisfying that my peers find our work useful. We work on some of the most challenging problems, and I guess that must be the reason for a large number of citations of our work.
What are you most proud of to date regarding your accomplishments and contributions to the field?
Well, of course, I'm indeed happy that we're able to make useful contributions in research, but I'm really proud of the large number of graduate students and postdocs who work with me and are working and are making contributions in the industry. On the personal side, I'm proud that my own daughter is a geophysicist and my son is a mathematician. So they are both working in a field that are very close to my heart.
Do they ever call on you for some help?
But they try not to. But I give them advice anyways.
It's hard-earned advice. You have 8,000 plus papers. In the award citation, the authors say you show no sign of letting up. So, what are you most excited for looking ahead in your work?
In geophysics, there is no shortage of challenging problems. That is the most exciting part. And as the computers get faster, we try to solve problems that we could not even think about solving some years ago. And that's what really keeps us all going. It's really exciting field to be in.
Speaking of these students that you're proud of, is there one thing that you hope your students that pass through your way remember about geophysics?
Yes, the geophysics is a branch of geosciences. And so the most important part or most important goal is to unravel the mysteries of the subsurface. And do not believe in any technique that does not work on real data. That would be my advice to all of my students, and I've done that several times.
For those that didn't have a chance to hear your acceptance speech at Anaheim, could you provide a little excerpt of your speech?
Many years ago, during one of the SEG conferences, I went up to the recipient of the Kauffman Medal of that year. I was a fairly young scientist then, and congratulated him. And to that, he said, Mrinal, I must have done something good. So I feel the same feeling. And I'd like to thank the geophysics community in general for the recognition and considering me worthy of this medal. Thank you.
Is there anything you would like to leave for maybe young society members who really want to be involved and contribute to not only the field but also the society of exploration geophysicists?
Yes, I always advise young students to flip through the pages of geophysics, even the undergrads, because I grew up doing that and didn't make any sense to me when I was a first year or second year undergrad. But eventually I found, oh, yeah, I can understand what's written in there. So I really advise them to participate in SEG activities in all possible forms and basically read geophysics, the leading edge, and the interpretation, and they will find a lot of interesting ideas in there.
When you think back on your career to date, is there a moment or something where you felt like things finally you understood geophysics in a way differently than you had prior to that time?
Yes, one of the reasons that I went to grad school is after my undergrad, I was hired to be a seismic processor, and I was asked my boss to do migration of some seismic data. And I had no clue about what migration was. It was very new then, and I was only taught about some geometric method of migration. So I pulled out some papers, and I thought the math was wrong. And so I thought I must go to grad school to have better understanding of wave propagation. As indeed, after a couple of years in grad school, when I went back and read those papers, then started to make sense as to why the math didn't seem right, but they worked, and why people took those shortcuts that needed to be, because otherwise we could not come up with an algorithm that is practical. So I'm glad I went to grad school, and primarily because I wanted to have better understanding of the current developments. And that's never going to be a mistake for anyone.
Is there any other final thoughts you would like to leave with our listeners?
Well, I'd say that just do what you like doing the best. Then you would be putting best efforts, and people will really recognize, and you will be able to make an impact. That's what I'd like to say to the young geophysicists.
Well, most excellent. Congratulations on your honor, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you very much.
At seg.org/podcast, you will find the full list of award winners and links to the leading edge article. Follow Seismic Sound Off at seg.org/podcast to hear new episodes or subscribe for free on your phone. Seismic Sound Off is sponsored by the SEG Wiki, the place to find hundreds of biographies of geoscientists, open access tutorials, and ongoing translations of SEG's best-selling book, Robert Sher's Encyclopedic Dictionary. Type wiki.seg.org into your browser to visit the world's first online geophysics encyclopedia. Original music by Zach Bridges. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by me, Andrew Geary. The SEG podcast team is Jennifer Crockett, Allie McGinnis, and Mick Sweeney. Thank you for listening. This is Seismic Sound Off, signaling off.